rarest motorbike?
No.
Oh, it's this bike here.
Rarest motorbike.
There it is. Here we go.
Look at that thing.
Okay, we don't class it, but if you go on the internet or Google Trove, it will come up every time as the world's rarest bike. Now, what would happen is 1967. Well, you're going to have to use your imagination because none of you have been born by then. So, we're going to Chicago, North Carolina Street. And what would happen is the face of Chicago was changing. So a gentleman buys a corner plot, North Carolina Street, Pier Street, and he asks a couple of Polish builders or plumbers to actually knock the building down. Well, these plumbers are going to knock it down by hand. So they're used to hearing the crack of the hammer hitting the brick and the thud as it lands on the room next door or out in the courtyard. So they've been working probably for a few days, and all of a sudden the crack doesn't come to a thud, the crack comes to a ting, and then another one, and then another. By the time the 6th, 7th or 8th brick has hit something metallic, they stop what they're doing. They get a set of step ladders, they shimmy up and they look over, not into the room next door, but down into a secret cavity where they could see the bricks laying on something covered under a dust sheet. It would be this very bike in this original condition, except at that stage it had been so long in that cavity that the tyres were completely rotten. You couldn't see the colour of the paint because of the dirt and the grime, and it had a dirty old tar over a lot of everything. Now the Polish plumbers realised this is an old gangster's trick, and anything they could get away with, they would claim as their own. So they pulled the wall down. On pulling back the dust sheet, they realised they'd got a motorbike they'd never heard of. It must have some value. So at lunchtime, they go up to the expert on motorcycling in North Carolina Street. This would be Turillo and Albert Tacci, a father and son team that ran the local Suzuki dealership. Not only were they experts, they were collectors of rare American motorbikes. But with all their expertise, they'd never heard of a bike called a Trail, and more important, they'd never seen an engine quite like this. Now, Turillo and Albert suspect that this could be a missing link, a link between the motor bicycle with pedals and a motorbike with a kickstart. So they go into negotiation with the Polish plumbers, eventually swapping a second-hand Suzuki for this bike. Now, Turillo and Albert have got no idea what they want, so they push the bike into the workshop. There, they would carefully sponge off all the dirt and grime, revealing this original paint. They would order and fit the new tyres. While they're waiting for the tyres to be delivered, they would put oil in the engine, getting the engine to move over nice and freely. Eventually, when the tyres are fitted, they would put fuel in the tank, and with compression sparkling fuel, you've got yourself a running motorbike. Turillo and Albert keep this bike until the late 1970s. That's when a gentleman called Bud Eakin would buy the bike sight unseen. Now, I'm guessing that possibly someone knows Bud Eakin, yes?
What?
No.
What?
Bud
Do you
Eakin.
know him?
No? Okay, Bud Eakin, one of the world's top motocross, enduro and desert racers. In the international 6-day trial, which is the hardest race on a motorbike you could do, Bud Eakin would actually win the gold medallion at least 5 times for America. But his main claim to fame, he's a Triumph dealer from California. His close personal friend, his riding companion, probably his best customer, was a gentleman called Steve McQueen. In 1963, when Steve McQueen is making a film called The Great Escape, it would be Bud, his good friend, who was be invited to go over to Germany, where he could do the stunts. Now, you will see Captain Shield, Steve McQueen, putting the garroted wire across the track, the German dispatch rider on that Triumph-looking BMW. Bud Eakin would hit the garroted wire, skid off, the chase was on. Captain Shields would get the Triumph and he would ride off. He's hotly pursued by the German army, which is actually Steve McQueen in a German uniform riding a BMW. That chase culminates with that famous jump over the barbed wire fence where Bud Eakin jumps for his good friend Steve McQueen. Now, it wasn't that Steve McQueen couldn't do the jump, it was because Steve McQueen couldn't get insured to do the jump. For the self-same reason, in the chase scene in Bullet, primarily that green Mustang is being driven by Bud Eakin.
Oh, wow.
Again, Steve McQueen couldn't get insured. Now, Bud was never credited with them roles. However, in the late 1970s in Chicago, remember Chicago, Bud Eakin would be credited for doing the stunts in the film The Blues Brothers. Now, what happens is, we didn't actually know the correct connection until about 8 months ago, because that's when we found out that Cirillo's nephew actually came into the museum, the band who actually owned this bike of the Polish drummers. He said, oh no, Steve McQueen was a close personal friend with Cirillo and Albert. He, Steve McQueen, bought the entire Indian collection of them when they decided in the late 1970s to close the dealership. At the same time, Bud was up in Chicago and probably had a phone call from Steve McQueen. Come down and have a look at a few of the bikes. Now, Bud Eakin and Steve McQueen were in very close competition with each other. Bud will turn around and say, well, I had about 130 bikes in my collection. Steve McQueen had 300. May have had something to do with his money. But of course, Bud Eakin's were all pre-1916. Now, when Bud Eakin sees this bike, he notices something very unusual. So he actually purchases 3 bikes on that day, this being one of them. When they're down in his dealership, he calls his experts in, who would go through this bike with a fine-tooth comb. Now, this has been verified by Dow and other experts, because every single major part of this motorcycle, with the exception of 5 individual parts, all the other major parts had been homemade. Now, the 5 parts that Mr. Trott purchased with his own money, being the seat, the carburettor, the magneto, and the 2 wheel rims, the experts using these 5 parts would give this motorcycle a year of manufacture based on them 5 parts as 1916. So in 1916, or thereabouts, Mr. Trott has designed possibly one of the earliest 80 cubic inch 3-speed transmission kickstart operating motorbike, not just in the whole of America, the whole of the world. But more important, this bike was 21 years ahead of Harley Davidson's 80 cubic inch, light years ahead of India. The American male and female psyche, bigger, better, faster. Had this gone on sale in 1916, instead of being put into a wall, it probably would have sold like hotcakes, putting Harley and Indian out of business during the Depression. Google this bike, I will guarantee it will come up as the world's rarest motor.